So today I will present one of our recent results. It's a quantum key distribution-based long-term archiving scheme that is actually the first to provide both long-term integrity and everlasting confidentiality. And this work has been done in collaboration with many people, with Johannes Braun, Johannes Buchmann, and Matthias Geis from the TU Darmstadt, and with Mikio Fujiwara, Shihiro Muriai, Masahide Sasaki, and Atsuka Waseda from the NICT in Tokyo, Japan. So let me give a short motivation to this topic and present the challenges. So for those of you that have seen the introductory talk yesterday, some of the slides will look familiar, but I will present just the most important aspects that we actually need to follow this talk. So the motivation we already said yesterday. So with the increasing digitalization, also the amount of data that needs to be archived electronically increases repeatedly. And examples are medical records, genome databases, text data, and also governmental secrets. Medical records, for instance, have to be kept as long as the respective persons are alive, and sometimes even beyond this time. So the time, the protection time, and the archiving time may easily become 100 years. So what are the protection goals with respect to long-term archiving? So obviously, we need long-term integrity protection. So that means we need some evidence that data has been archived at a certain point in time and has not been changed since. And then we also, for many applications, so for instance for medical records, we need everlasting confidentiality. That means that even a computationally unbounded attacker should not be able to get access to data in transit or data at rest. So how does currently cryptographic protection looks like? So integrity, it's very common to use electronic signatures. And for data in transit and also data in rest, we use encryption schemes. But the problem is that the current techniques are complexity-based, so the techniques for signatures and encryption schemes. And as also we heard yesterday, complexity-based encryption and signatures are not enough, because their security relies on the intractability of some computational problems, and in the future, the keys we use today might be too short, or we have new attacks that allow actually to break these assumptions. But so what we have is that when we sign and we encrypt data, we have an expiration date for their security. But the good news is that long-term protection is possible. And in the field of long-term archiving, researchers have proposed different solutions, actually independent, so for the integrity protection and for the confidentiality protection individually. So let's look first at the long-term integrity protection. And it turned out that primitives that provide integrity, so for instance signatures, their security can actually be prolonged. So we also saw this yesterday in a talk from Arthur Bolas. So one solution we have here is we use timestamp chains. So to be more precise, when a document is archived, the document owner will generate a hash to the document and sends this to a trusted third party, which party we call timestamp authority. And the timestamp authority reads the current time T0, signs the time together with a hash, and returns the signature to the document owner. And this signature we also call timestamp. And the problem is that the signature, the security of the signature will become insecure over time. So what is done is that the document owner, before this can happen, generates a hash to the signature, and with the signature, the old signature together with the document, and gets this information timestamped by the timestamp authority. So we see that the first timestamp protects the integrity of the original data, and the second timestamp actually proved that the first timestamp existed already at a point in time when the signature used was still secure. No? Good. So, but the problem is when we look at long-term confidentiality, then we have the problem that we cannot prolong the security of hashed or encrypted data. So the reason is that when we reveal hashed or encrypted data, so for instance because we send it over the internet or a third party process this data, there might be someone that stores this information, and actually this person can then, when the encryption scheme or hash function became insecure, reveal the data sent. So this shows that the problem of everlasting confidentiality is not a problem of the future. It's a problem we have now. Because as soon as data is revealed, then we risk that it might stored somewhere and loses its confidentiality over time. So what we need to have, we have to protect confidentiality right from the beginning. So and that means that we need information theoretic security with respect to long-term confidentiality. And that actually means if I have a ciphertext and I run a brute force attack, so attacker just try to find out what could be the different documents that could be actually encrypted here, the outcome of this attack must be that it can be any document with the same probability, or almost same probability. So, and as we have seen in the last talk, for data in transit, some solution we can use to achieve this is to combine quantum t-distribution with one-time pads. For the data at rest, we use secret sharing. We also saw this in the last talk. So to briefly summarize it, what we do is we decompose a document into shares, which we store on different shareholders, such that only a threshold of these shares is needed to reconstruct the document. But important is that less than the threshold number of these shares do not reveal any information about the document. But another attacker we have here is an attacker that actually could go to the different shareholders and try to collect all of these shares over time. So we call this a mobile adversary. And to prevent this attack, we actually use proactive secret sharing. And here the shareholders renew the shares from time to time. So the goals we had in this collaboration was first, we wanted to combine these techniques for long-term integrity and everlasting confidentiality protection into a single archiving scheme. And the second goal was we also wanted to integrate this new and interesting technique of quantum key distribution, and we wanted to have a proof of concept implementation and also see the performance of our solution. So the first goal we achieved by generating timestamp chains to unconditionally hiding commitments. And for the second goal, we combined actually the cryptographic solutions we developed here at the TU Darmstadt with the just presented Tokyo QKD network. So let me provide some more details. An important part of our solution is to use unconditionally hiding commitments. So these schemes have two algorithms. The first is commit, and the input to the commit algorithm is a document, and the output is a commitment to this document and a randomly chosen decommitment value, D. Then we have a second algorithm called verify, and this algorithm gets as input the document, the commitment, and the decommitment value, and it returns valid if the commitment is a correct commitment to the document together with the decommitment value, and invalid otherwise. So the purpose of this scheme is to allow a document owner to commit to a document while keeping it completely hidden from the people that just see the commitment. So we call this hiding. And if even a computationally unbounded attacker cannot see the document committed to, cannot reveal any information, it's information theoretically hiding. This is what we need here. On the downside, another important property of this scheme is that it's binding. So a person that generated a commitment should not be able to change the value committed to. So the downside is we have this property here only computationally binding. That means we are safe as long as the document owner is computationally bounded, which is usually the case, but we get problem in the long term. But there's a solution, and the solution is very similar to the problem we have with signatures. We can actually prolong the security. So what we do is when we archive a document, we generate a commitment, and we get that timestamped. And then when the commitment scheme is about to become insecure, we commit again to the document and to the decommitment value and add that to the timestamp sequence. So summarized, we actually have two chains here. We have the timestamp chain, and the timestamp chain actually timestamps a chain of commitments. And we see here that the commitment renewal happens less often than the timestamp renewal. That's actually due to the fact that commitment schemes do not have secret keys. So their security lasts longer than timestamps that are signature-based. And so with these techniques, we provided a framework for an archiving scheme that has both properties. And the framework consists of an evidence service that maintains timestamp chains to documents. That's for long-term integrity protection. And it generates these timestamp chains with the help of a timestamp service. This is the trusted third party here. And these timestamp chains can be used to prove towards a verifier that the document has been archived at a certain point in time and has not been changed since. Everlasting confidentiality towards the evidence service is provided by timestamping unconditionally hiding commitments instead of the documents or hashes to the documents. And with respect to the data stored, so which is here actually document and the decommitment value, we use proactive secret sharing. And when we communicate data that is not completely unconditionally hiding, like shares to the document and to the decommitment value, we always use private channels. So this is actually the process which is carried out in total. So when a document owner wants to archive a document, it generates a commitment to the document and sends the commitment C0 to the evidence service. And the evidence service then generates the timestamp chain. Then it sends shares to the document and the decommitment value to the shareholders to store them. And then when it's needed from time to time, the shareholders renew the shares to the document and the decommitment value, and the evidence service takes care of renewing the timestamps. And then when the commitment is about to become insecure, the document owner requests the shares to the document and the decommitment value from the proactive secret sharing scheme, commits to this data, and sends the new commitment C1 to the evidence service. And then it adds the new decommitment value D1 to the data stored by the proactive secret sharing scheme. So when a document owner wants to prove towards a third party that a document did not change, it does the following. First, it requests all shares from the shareholders, and then it reconstructs from these shares the document and the decommitment values to all commitments that have been generated to this document. It also requests the timestamp chain from the evidence service and sends this information together with the time T0 when the document was archived to the verifier. And the verifier verifies the information as follows. First, it verifies the timestamp chains, so all the signatures in the chain. And this actually proves that the commitments really existed at their generation times. And especially that proves that commitment C0 was actually generated and archived at time T0. Then it checks that all these cryptographic primitives used were secure in that time of usage. That means signatures, commitments, and hashes were secure when they were generated, and they remained secure until they were renewed and replaced by new, more secure primitives. And then finally, the verifier opens all the commitments with the decommitment values it has, and when this proof is correct, then the first commitment C0 opens to the document. So let's look at the security assumptions we have such that our solution is secure. So the adversary model will be further explained by Matthias Geitz this afternoon. But just to give a high-level feeling, so actually we assume here an adversary that has an unbounded lifetime, so he can interact forever with the system if he likes, but is computationally bounded in any unit of real time. This attacker eavesdrop channels. This attacker collects shares from shareholders. But here we assume actually that it cannot collect more than a threshold number of these shares between two share renewals. And also we assume that the trusted third party, so in our setup the timestamp service, is trustworthy to include the correct time in the timestamps. That's a very important assumption. So and then we have the following cryptographic components. First, we have authenticated channels. And authenticated channels provide mutual authentication in a computational sense. Actually, computation here is sufficient because we only need the data to provide integrity while the data is sent, but we don't need it in the long term. Then we have private channels. In addition to authenticity, these channels provide unconditional confidentiality of the data transmitted. And then we have, for the confidentiality with respect to the storage, we use a proactive secret sharing scheme that is secure in the mobile adversary model, so it renews the shares. And we have timestamps for long-term integrity. The security notion of timestamps is unforgeability. This will also be further explained by Matthias Geis in his talk. But on a high level, we will see that actually the notion is very similar, can be shown very similar to the unforgeability notion of signature schemes. And since we can renew timestamps, we only require them to be secure in the time they were used, so before they are renewed. And we do not put any restriction with respect to confidentiality to the timestamp chains, because this is actually provided by the commitment scheme. So we need a commitment scheme that provides information theoretic security with respect to confidentiality, so to hidingness, and it's sufficient that it's computationally binding because we renew it. So and under these assumptions, so if this is fulfilled, then we have actually here a solution that provides long-term integrity and everlasting confidentiality. So let me give some information about the implementation we have. So the cryptographic primitives we implemented in C++ and Java. For commitment schemes, we used Peterson commitments because they are unconditionally hiding and computationally binding. And to be able to commit to any document independent of the length, we used a hash function. So we first hash the document and then we commit to the document. In the same, the hash and sign paradigm is also used for the timestamp scheme. So here we use also hash functions from the SHA-2 family. And then when we hash the data, we sign it using RSA. For the authenticated channels, we use TLS 1.2 in the currently most secure configuration. And for secret sharing, we use Shamir secret sharing. And for the secure channels, as presented in the last talk, for the private channels, we use here the Tokyo QKD network. So with this setup, so this example instantiations of commitments and signatures and timestamp, we implemented that and we ran it and we did some experimental evaluation. So we are basically interested also how much space this solution consumes and how efficient it is. So the scenario is that we simulated storing information for 100 years, starting in 2016. And the parameters we choose here were in accordance to the Lenstra heuristic. So the parameters are assumed to hold until a certain year. And we updated timestamps every second year. The reason is that the recommended lifetime of certificates to signatures is 2 years, and so therefore we renewed in this interval. The commitments we renew every 10 years. That's just because the parameters we use for the commitments are expected to hold for 10 years, and therefore we renew the commitments every 10 years. So this shows the information that must be held by the storage, by the evidence service. So this is actually the timestamp chain. And we see that actually this chain grows linearly in the number of timestamp renewals. We have some small superlinear factors here just because the parameter size increase from time to time, and then we have this small peak. But what is very interesting is that because we use this hash function before we commit to this, actually this evidence is independent of the size of the document. So It's just dependent on the number of renewals and the time we actually archive the information. The same holds for the data stored by the proactive secret sharing scheme. So this just shows the data in addition to the document. These are basically the decommitment values. And we also here, we see that the stairs are basically because when we add new decommitment values, that they are larger than the ones used before. And also they accumulate over time, but also independent of the document size. And this shows the efficiency of the verification algorithm. So obviously, the longer timestamp chains become, the more time it's needed to actually verify their correctness. But what is interesting is that even after 100 years, performing this verification with the technique we have today, it only takes 10 seconds. So it's quite feasible. So these are an overview of the times that are consumed by the quantum key distribution channel. So we see that the time needed actually to generate these keys. And at the moment, this is the limiting factor. But what is interesting to know is that actually these keys can be generated in advance. So it's not that if I want to archive information, I have to wait a long time until I can do it, but I might have generated these keys before, so then I have directly access to them when I want to use them. So to conclude, this is, to our knowledge, the first long-term archiving scheme that provides both everlasting confidentiality and long-term integrity protection. And we achieve the everlasting confidentiality by using the quantum key distribution channels to exchange information because we timestamp only unconditionally hiding commitments, and we use proactive secret sharing to store the information. And long-term integrity we get by generating timestamp chains to the unconditionally hiding commitments. For future work, something that's very important, we want to improve the performance of the quantum key distribution. And what is also interesting to us is we saw this renewal process when we renewed the commitments. And actually, we would like to come up with a solution that allows to renew the commitments without actually having the document owner involved that requests and reconstruct the document at that time. So this concludes my talk. Thank you very much for the attention. I'm open for questions.